What if I told you that the most loving brother in the world was slowly killing the person he was trying to save? What if I told you that 7 years of rescue attempts, emotional support, and financial help was actually preventing his sister from getting better? This is the story of Gerry Santos, a man who thought love meant never giving up on someone until the day he learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone fall. But here's what makes this story different. Gerry wasn't just any concerned brother. He was a professional social worker who helped other families heal from destructive patterns every single day. Yet, he was completely blind to what he was doing to his own family. By the end of this story, you'll understand why Gerry's therapist told him, "You haven't been saving your sister, you've been stealing her chance to save herself." Gerry Santos was the kind of brother everyone wishes they had. For 34 years, he'd been the rock of his family, the responsible one, the problem solver, the one who always had the answers. As a social worker specializing in family support in Manila, Gerry spent his days helping other families navigate their darkest moments. Parents struggling with rebellious teenagers, couples on the brink of divorce, families torn apart by harmful behaviors. Gerry had seen it all, and somehow he always found a way to help them heal. His success rate was remarkable. Families would come to him broken, desperate, ready to give up on each other. 6 months later, they'd be sending him Christmas cards with photos of their kids graduating, their marriages renewed, their loved ones celebrating years of positive change. Gerry had a gift. He could see patterns that others missed, identify the root causes beneath surface problems, and create action plans that actually worked. His colleagues called him the miracle worker. His clients called him a lifesaver. But it was his work with his own family that defined him most. Specifically, his relationship with his younger sister, Anette. Anette Santos was everything Gerry wasn't. Where Gerry was steady and reliable, Anette was impulsive and charismatic. Where Gerry planned every detail of his future, Anette lived entirely in the moment, chasing dreams that changed with the weather. Where Gerry had built a stable life with a career he loved, Anette had been struggling with destructive patterns for over a decade. The Santos family represented the modern Filipino middle class. Their mother, Elena, worked as a bank supervisor in BGC, always impeccably dressed, but constantly worried about her children. Their father, Roberto, was a successful operations manager at a major telecommunications company, the type who solved stress by working late at his office in Ortigas. And Gerry? Gerry was the designated problem solver, the one everyone turned to when Annette's life inevitably spiraled out of control. Gerry's modern condominium unit in Makati told the story of his obsession. The small dining table was covered with photos, Annette's college graduation before the destructive behaviors took hold, the two siblings at a resort in Batangas 3 years ago when Anette had been doing well for 4 months, family vacations to Baguio and Subic when everything was simple. But it wasn't just photos. Gerry had created what could only be described as an Anette command center. A simple desk in his small home office held his laptop and a single notebook filled with detailed information about Annette's struggles. A small bulletin board on the wall displayed appointment schedules, program brochures, and a timeline he'd created by hand. He had files, digital and physical files. One folder on his laptop tracked Annette's various program attempts with success rates and costs. A physical notebook monitored her behavior patterns, what triggered setbacks, what situations led to legal troubles, which friends were bad influences, which family events Anette actually showed up for. Gerry will know what to do, their mother would say whenever Annette struggled. Gerry always figures it out. And Gerry always did for 7 years, through 7 different program attempts, countless setbacks, and more difficulties than he could count, Gerry had been Annette's lifeline. Let me paint you a picture of what Gerry's help looked like. Because on the surface, it seemed like the most loving, supportive brotherhood you could imagine. When Anette got into legal trouble, Gerry didn't just help her out. He researched defense attorneys in Quezon City, drove her to every court appearance in a second-hand Honda Civic, and helped her prepare for meetings with her lawyer. When Anette lost her apartment in Pasig because she'd spent her rent money on harmful choices, Gerry didn't just offer his couch. He spent weekends apartment hunting with Anette around Metro Manila, paid the security deposit from his savings, and co-signed the lease for a modest unit. When Anette got fired from her administrative jobs at local companies, Gerry would spend hours helping her update her resume, practice interview skills, and sometimes even ask his professional contacts to consider Anette for opportunities. When Anette needed to enter a support program, Gerry would research facilities for weeks, compare different approaches, work with their health insurance, and often pay additional costs out of his own savings when coverage wasn't enough. But here's what Gerry didn't see. Every time Gerry solved one of Annette's problems, Anette learned that she didn't have to solve it herself. Every time Gerry cushioned the consequences of Annette's choices, Anette learned that her choices didn't really have consequences. When Anette got into legal trouble, she didn't experience the full weight of facing the situation alone. Gerry was already assembling a legal team. When Anette lost housing, she didn't experience the discomfort that might motivate real change. Gerry was already securing her another apartment. When Anette lost jobs, she didn't have to face the reality of her behavior affecting her employability. Gerry was already networking to find her new opportunities. You see where this is going, don't you? Gerry had become so good at problem management that Anette never had to develop any problem-solving skills of her own. But by the time our story begins, something was changing in Gerry. The constant emergencies were taking their toll, not just financially, but emotionally and spiritually. Gerry hadn't taken a real vacation in 3 years because he couldn't risk being unreachable if Anette needed him. He turned down 2 job promotions that would have required travel to other provinces or longer hours, and he couldn't compromise his availability for Annette-related situations. His dating life was non-existent. The few women he'd tried to build relationships with had gotten tired of dates being interrupted by emergency phone calls, of conversations that always seemed to circle back to his sister's problems, of feeling like they were competing with Anette for Gerry's attention. His friends had learned to stop making plans with him that couldn't be canceled at the last minute. Gerry might have to leave early, they'd warned new people in their circle. His sister might need him. His savings account, which had once been growing steadily, was nearly empty. Between support programs, legal fees, apartment deposits, and countless smaller emergencies, Gerry had spent over 400,000 pesos in the past 2 years trying to keep Anette stable. But the money wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was the slow erosion of Gerry's own identity. It was a Tuesday evening in October when Gerry's carefully constructed world began to crumble. He was sitting in his Makati condo reviewing case files on his laptop when his phone rang. Annette's name appeared on the screen. Gerry's stomach automatically tightened. These calls never brought good news anymore. In fact, Gerry had started to dread the sound of his own ringtone. "Kuya Gerry?" Annette's voice was shaky, desperate. "Nagkamali na naman ako. I'm not in a good place right now." Gerry closed his eyes and felt that familiar weight settle on his shoulders. "Where are you, Anette?" "I'm at some budget motel in Mandaluyong. Star Lodge or something? I don't even remember how I got here. I made bad choices again, Kuya. After 4 months of doing well, I couldn't handle it anymore." Gerry was already reaching for his car keys, his jacket, his wallet. The routine was so automatic he could do it in his sleep. And sometimes he felt like he was doing it in his sleep. Okay, it's gonna be fine. I'm coming to get you. We'll figure this out. I don't have any money left. I spent everything. And I think I might have lost my job at the advertising agency. I haven't shown up in 3 days. Don't worry about that right now. Just tell me which motel. But as Gerry drove his Civic through the heavy exit traffic to rescue his sister for what felt like the 100th time, something was different. Instead of his usual mixture of worry and determination, he felt something else. Exhaustion. Not just physical exhaustion, though the sleepless nights and emergency interventions had certainly taken their toll. He was emotionally exhausted, spiritually exhausted. He felt like he was drowning in someone else's struggles, and no matter how hard he swam toward shore, the current kept pulling him back out to sea. You know that feeling, don't you? When you've been carrying someone else's problems for so long that you can't remember what your own problems even are anymore? When you've become so good at problem management that your entire identity revolves around being needed by someone who's falling apart. Gerry had become dependent on being Anette's savior, and like any unhealthy pattern, it was slowly destroying both of them. When Gerry pulled into the parking lot of the Star Lodge in Mandaluyong, he sat in his car for a moment, staring at the flickering neon sign. The place looked exactly like every other rock-bottom location where he'd found Anette over the years, a stark contrast to the comfortable middle-class life they usually lived. Cracked pavement, broken security lights, the smell of desperation and bad decisions. He found Anette in room 237, looking like a ghost of herself. Hollow eyes, shaking hands, clothes that hadn't been changed in days and were now wrinkled and stained. Anette was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Kuya. I don't know what's wrong with me. I had 4 months. 4 months of doing well, and I threw it all away.
Gerry sat down next to his sister, and for the first time in years, he didn't immediately start solving the problem. He didn't ask about what triggered the setback, didn't start planning the next support approach, didn't reassure Anette that everything would be okay. Instead, he just sat there, looking at this broken person who shared his DNA, and felt something crack inside his chest. I can't keep doing this, Gerry said quietly. Anette looked up, surprised. What do you mean, Kuya? I mean I can't keep living your life for you. I can't keep being more invested in your recovery than you are. Annette's face crumpled. Please don't give up on me. You're the only one who believes in me. And there it was, the manipulation that had worked for 7 years. The desperate plea that had always made Gerry swallow his own needs and dive back into rescue mode. But this time, Gerry heard something different in those words. He heard Annette's complete dependence on external validation, her inability to find motivation from within herself, her assumption that someone else would always be there to catch her when she fell. Anette, Gerry said slowly, when was the last time you believed in yourself? Anette stared at him, unable to answer. The breaking point came 6 weeks later. Gerry was at his office in Makati, leading a counseling session with a family, parents and their teenage daughter Emma, who'd been caught engaging in risky behaviors. As he listened to the parents describe their desperate attempts to control their daughter's behavior, something inside him shifted. We've tried everything, the mother was saying, her voice breaking. We've taken away her phone, her allowance, her college fund. We follow her everywhere, search her room, monitor her every move. We check on her constantly. We just love her so much, and we can't watch her destroy herself. Gerry leaned forward slightly, his voice calm and professional. I can hear how much you love Emma. That love is unmistakable. But let me ask you something. In all of these efforts to protect her, when was the last time Emma had to solve a problem entirely on her own? The parents looked at each other uncertainly. Well, we can't just let her fail, the father said defensively. I'm not suggesting you let her fail, Gerry replied with practiced ease. "I'm asking about natural consequences. When someone makes a choice, they need to experience the full weight of that choice to learn from it. What happens when you step in to manage every consequence?" Gerry watched Emma slump further into her chair with each word, her arms crossed defensively, her eyes rolling with practiced teenage disdain. "You're not helping me," Emma said, quietly, her voice barely audible. "You're suffocating me. How am I supposed to learn to make good choices if you never let me make any choices at all?" Gerry nodded thoughtfully, recognizing the pattern immediately. "Emma, that's a very mature observation. Can you help your parents understand what that feels like for you?" The father leaned forward aggressively. "You've proven you can't be trusted to make choices. Look what happened when we gave you freedom. You ended up in trouble." "Because I didn't know how to handle freedom," Emma shot back, tears starting to flow. "You never taught me how to make decisions because you never let me make any decisions at all. You just swoop in and fix everything or control everything, and then you wonder why I don't know how to fix anything myself." Gerry sat back, his professional mask perfectly in place, but something was shifting inside him. He'd guided hundreds of families through this exact realization. He knew the pattern by heart: overprotective love that prevents growth, parents who solve problems instead of teaching problem-solving skills. But it was Emma's next words that hit him like a physical blow. "You love me so much that you won't let me grow up. And now I don't know how to be an adult because you never let me practice being one." Gerry's pen froze in his hand. His mouth went dry, because he could hear Anette saying those exact words, if Anette had the self-awareness to recognize the pattern. For the first time in his 7-year career, the skilled family counselor was speechless. That evening, Gerry sat in his Civic in the parking area of his Makati condo building, unable to bring himself to go upstairs to his unit. His phone had 17 missed calls from Anette. His savings account was nearly empty from paying for Annette's latest support program. His own therapy appointments, which he'd been attending at a local wellness center to cope with the stress, had become entirely focused on Annette's problems instead of his own growth. He realized with startling clarity that he hadn't had a conversation about anything other than Annette's struggles in over 2 years. When his colleagues asked how he was doing at their office building, he talked about Anette. When coworkers made small talk, he found himself sharing updates about Annette's latest situation. When his mother called from her BGC office to check on him, they spent the entire conversation discussing Annette's needs. Gerry Santos, the successful social worker with his own life, interests, and dreams, had disappeared. In his place was Annette's kuya, a person whose entire identity revolved around managing someone else's destructive patterns. He thought about Emma's words, "You love me so much that you won't let me grow up." Is that what he'd been doing? Loving Anette so much that he'd never let her grow up? When his phone rang again, Annette's name flashing on the screen, Gerry stared at it for a long moment. Anette was probably calling from another situation, another emergency that Gerry would need to solve, another consequence that Gerry would need to handle. For the first time in 7 years, Gerry pressed the red button and declined the call. His phone immediately started ringing again. Gerry declined that call too, and again, declined, and again, declined. After the 5th declined call, Gerry turned his phone completely off. He sat in his car in the parking area and cried, not just for Anette, but for himself, for the life he'd given up, for the person he'd stopped being, for the 7 years he'd spent living someone else's destructive patterns. The next day, Gerry made an appointment with Dr. Sarah Lim, a counselor who specialized in families affected by destructive behavioral patterns. Her office was in a professional building in Ortigas. He'd been putting off this conversation for months, but Emma's words kept echoing in his head. "Tell me about your relationship with your sister," Dr. Lim said, settling into her chair across from Gerry in her office. Gerry launched into his well-rehearsed explanation of Annette's behavioral history, the various program attempts, the setbacks, the interventions. He spoke for 20 minutes straight, detailing every program they'd tried, every strategy they'd implemented, every situation they'd navigated. Dr. Lim listened patiently, taking occasional notes. When Gerry finally finished his monologue, she asked a question that stopped him cold. Gerry, in all of these attempts to help Annette, what has Annette actually done to help herself? Gerry opened his mouth to answer, then closed it. He thought for a long moment. Well, she's gone to support programs that you researched and paid for? Yes, but she showed up. She participated. And when she struggled with challenges or life difficulties, who developed the coping strategies? Gerry felt something uncomfortable stirring in his chest. I did. I helped her. Someone had to help her navigate it. She couldn't handle it alone. Has Annette ever experienced the full consequences of her choices? Lost housing because she couldn't pay rent? Lost a job without you intervening? Been forced to find her own support resources? No, Gerry said quietly. I couldn't let that happen. She might have ended up in real trouble in Metro Manila. She could have been seriously hurt. She could have been in real danger. Dr. Lim leaned forward. Gerry, I want you to consider something that might be difficult to hear. Is it possible that your love and support, as genuine and well-intentioned as it is, has actually prevented Annette from developing the skills and motivation she needs for real change? The words hit Gerry like a physical blow. Are you saying this is my fault? I'm not talking about fault or blame. I'm talking about patterns and outcomes. Real change requires the person struggling to take full responsibility for their choices and their growth. When someone else consistently steps in to manage consequences, research solutions, and provide resources, it can inadvertently enable the problem to continue. Gerry sat in silence, processing this new perspective. Everything he thought he knew about love, about helping, about being a good kuya was being turned upside down. But how do I just stop caring? How do I watch someone I love struggle and not help them? There's a difference between caring and enabling, Dr. Lim explained gently. You can love Annette deeply while still allowing her to experience the natural consequences of her choices. In fact, that might be the most loving thing you can do, to believe in her strength enough to let her use it. But what if she can't handle it? What if something terrible happens? Dr. Lim's voice was kind but firm. Gerry, what's happening right now? Is the current situation working? Is Annette getting better with your help, or is she staying stuck with your help? The question hung in the air like a challenge Gerry couldn't ignore. Over the next several sessions with Dr. Lim, Gerry began to see his relationship with Annette through a completely different lens. It wasn't pretty. Let's look at this objectively, Dr. Lim said during their third session. In 7 years of your intervention, how many times has Annette completed a support program without having setbacks within 6 months? Gerry calculated in his head. 0. How many times has Annette maintained stable housing for more than a year without your financial support? 0. How many times has Annette held a job for more than 6 months without you helping her get it or keep it? 0. How many times has Annette gone more than a year without needing you to rescue her from a difficult situation? Gerry's voice was barely a whisper. 0. Dr. Lim let the silence settle. Gerry, after 7 years of intensive support, Annette's behavioral patterns are not better. They're not even stable. If anything, the situations are getting more frequent and more severe. What does that tell you about the effectiveness of your approach? Gerry felt like the ground was shifting beneath his feet. Are you saying I should just abandon her? I'm saying you should consider the possibility that your rescuing is preventing her positive change. Every time you step in to handle a consequence, you're sending Annette the message that she doesn't have to handle it herself. Every time you research support options for her, you're telling her she doesn't need to take responsibility for her own growth. Every time you pay for her mistakes, you're enabling her to keep making those mistakes. Gerry thought about his work with other families. How many times had he told parents that they needed to let their children experience natural consequences? How many times had he explained that solving someone else's problems prevents them from developing problem-solving skills? "Oh, God," Gerry said suddenly. "I've been doing to Anette exactly what I tell my clients not to do with their family members." Dr. Lim nodded. "The hardest person to see clearly is often ourselves, especially when our actions come from love." That night, Gerry sat at his small dining table in his Makati condo with his laptop, typing what was perhaps the most difficult letter of his life. He went through 7 drafts, each one harder to write than the last. The final version read, "Anette, I love you more than you'll ever know. For 7 years, I've tried to save you from your struggles, but I've come to realize that I can't save you from something you have to choose to leave behind yourself. I've been enabling your destructive patterns by preventing you from experiencing the full consequences of your choices. Every time I've rescued you, I've accidentally taught you that you don't need to rescue yourself. Every time I've solved your problems, I've robbed you of the opportunity to develop your own problem-solving skills. Starting today, I will no longer provide financial support, housing, emergency assistance, or problem-solving help. I will not help you out of legal troubles, pay your rent, find you jobs, or research support options for you. This doesn't mean I don't love you. It means I love you enough to step back and let you find your own strength. When you're ready to make positive changes for yourself, not for me or anyone else, I'll be here to support your growth in healthy ways. I'll celebrate your victories and offer emotional support, but I won't be managing your life anymore. I believe you're stronger than you know. I believe you're capable of positive change. I believe you can build a life worth living. But I can't believe it for you. You have to believe it for yourself. Your Kuya who loves you enough to let you grow up, Gerry." The next few months were the hardest of Gerry's life. Annette's reaction to the letter was explosive and heartbreaking. She called Gerry screaming, crying, pleading, threatening. "You're killing me," she shouted during one particularly difficult conversation. "How can you just abandon me like this? What kind of Kuya are you? I thought you loved me." Anette showed up at Gerry's condo building at all hours, sometimes intoxicated, sometimes in distress, always desperate. She stood in the lobby screaming, begging the security guards to let her up, to make Gerry talk to her, to go back to the way things were. When Gerry didn't answer, Anette called their parents, their titos and titas, family friends, anyone who might pressure Gerry to resume his role as rescuer. "Gerry won't help Anette anymore," their mother called, to tell him from her BGC office, her voice thick with worry and accusation. "How can you be so cruel to your own sister?" "She's your bunso," their father added when he got on the phone from his Ortigas office. "Family doesn't give up on family." The guilt was overwhelming. Gerry would lie awake in his bed at night, wondering if Anette was safe, if she had a place to sleep, if she was eating. He checked Annette's Instagram and Facebook obsessively, looking for signs that she was okay. But Dr. Lim helped him stay strong. "This is the hardest part," she told him during their sessions. "Anette has learned that if she escalates her behavior enough, you'll eventually give in and rescue her. She's testing to see if your boundaries are real. If you rescue her now, you'll teach her that your boundaries don't mean anything." Gerry started attending family support circle meetings in Quezon City, support groups for families of people with destructive behavioral patterns. There he met other people who'd walked this painful path of learning to love someone without enabling them. He heard stories from other families, parents who had stopped funding their children's destructive choices, siblings who had learned to set boundaries, spouses who had refused to enable their partners. Each story followed the same pattern: initial anger and escalation, followed eventually by real change when the person was forced to take responsibility for their own life. Gerry learned new phrases: detaching with love, tough love, enabling versus helping. He learned that setting boundaries wasn't cruel, it was necessary for both his own health and Annette's potential for positive change. Most importantly, he learned that he couldn't love someone into wellness. Real change had to come from within the person struggling. For the first time in years, Gerry began to rediscover who he was beyond being Annette's kuya. It was like meeting himself all over again. He accepted that promotion at work, the one that required occasional travel to provinces like Cebu and Davao. His first business trip in 3 years felt like freedom. He started dating again. It took him months to have a first conversation with a woman without mentioning Annette's problems. When he finally did meet someone he connected with, a teacher who was fascinated by Gerry's work helping families heal, not his personal family drama, it felt like a breakthrough. He took up weekend hiking trips to mountains in Rizal and Batangas, something he'd always wanted to do but never had time for because of Annette-related situations. Every weekend, he'd drive his Civic to different trails, spending hours in nature, remembering what it felt like to have thoughts that weren't consumed by someone else's problems. He started reading books for pleasure again: fiction, philosophy, biographies of people who'd overcome challenges, anything that had nothing to do with destructive patterns or family problem management. His friends slowly began to trust that he might actually show up for plans and stay for entire events. They stopped warning new people about his potential early exits. Most surprisingly, his work with clients improved dramatically. Because he'd experienced the pain of loving someone without enabling them, he could help other families navigate that balance with genuine empathy and hard-won wisdom. 13 months after Gerry had stopped rescuing Annette, his doorbell rang on a Saturday morning. Gerry had been making coffee, enjoying the quiet routine of a weekend with no crises to manage, when he heard the familiar chime. He opened the door, but for a second, he didn't recognize the person standing in front of him. It wasn't until he heard those familiar words,
"Hello, Kuya."
that he realized it was Annette. But this was an Annette completely different from the broken woman he'd left in that motel room months ago. Her eyes were clear, not just free from substances, but bright with something Gerry hadn't seen in years: self-respect. Her posture was straight, her shoulders back. She was well-groomed, wearing clean, professional clothes that actually fit her properly. And there was something in her expression that stopped him in his tracks. Annette looked like an adult, not the perpetual teenager who'd been frozen in destructive patterns, but a grown woman who'd learned to take care of herself. "Hi, Kuya," Annette said quietly. "I've been clean for 6 months. I'm in a program, I have a sponsor, and I have a job at a call center in Ortigas. I wanted you to know that I'm okay. And I wanted to thank you." Gerry stared at his sister, hardly believing what he was seeing. "Thank me?" Annette nodded, and her eyes filled with tears. "For letting me fall. For the first time in my life, I had to figure out how to get back up on my own. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was also the first time I realized I was actually strong enough to do it." They stood there for a moment, both of them crying. Then Annette continued, "I know now that every time you rescued me, part of me believed I couldn't rescue myself. I thought you needed me to survive, which meant I never learned that I could survive on my own. When you stepped back, when you forced me to be responsible for my own life, that's when I finally had to grow up." Gerry hugged his sister, really hugged her for the first time in years. Not the desperate, fearful embrace of crisis, but the warm, proud embrace of two adults who respected each other. "I was so scared," Gerry admitted. "I thought letting you fall meant I didn't love you enough." Annette pulled back and looked her brother in the eyes. "You loved me enough to let me find my own strength. That's the hardest kind of love there is." "What happened? How did you finally get clean?" Annette smiled, and it was the first genuine smile Gerry had seen from her in years. "I hit my real bottom. Not the bottom where someone catches you, but the bottom where you have to catch yourself. I ended up in a halfway house in Quezon City, and for the first time, I couldn't call you to come get me. I had to figure it out myself. She paused, gathering her thoughts. At first, I was so angry. I hated you for abandoning me. But then I met this woman in the program who'd been clean for 2 years. She told me something that changed everything. She said, recovery isn't about having people who will save you, it's about becoming someone who can save yourself. That's when I realized that I'd never actually tried to get clean for me. I'd always been getting clean for you, or for mama and papa, or to avoid consequences. But I'd never done it because I wanted to live. When I finally had to face my dependency alone, that's when I discovered I actually wanted to fight. Over the following months, Gerry and Anette built a completely new relationship, one based on mutual respect rather than dependency. Anette never asked Gerry for money, and Gerry never offered it. Instead, Anette would tell him about her job at the call center, how she was learning to manage her own finances, how she was proud of paying her own rent for a small apartment in Marikina. When Anette struggled with cravings or life challenges, she didn't call Gerry to fix them. Instead, she called her sponsor, attended extra meetings, or used the coping skills she'd developed in treatment. Sometimes she'd call Gerry just to talk about the struggles, but not to be rescued from them. It's so different, Anette told Gerry during one of their weekly coffee meetings at a cafe in Green Hills. When I was using, every problem felt impossible because I knew someone else would have to solve it. Now when problems come up, I think, okay, what can I do about this? It's scary sometimes, but it's also empowering. Gerry watched his sister handle a difficult customer at work, a friendship conflict, and a minor motorcycle accident, all without calling Gerry for help. It was like watching someone learn to walk for the first time. I'm proud of you, he told her, after Anette successfully negotiated a shift change at work. Not because you got what you wanted, but because you advocated for yourself. Anette smiled. I'm proud of me, too. That's new. Thank you for joining me for another story here on The Turning Point. Gerry's journey reminds us that sometimes the most loving thing we can do is step back and allow someone we care about to find their own strength. Real love isn't about rescuing someone from every consequence. It's about believing in their ability to overcome challenges themselves. Gerry learned that his 7 years of helping had actually been preventing Anette from developing the skills she needed to save herself. Are you currently trying to save someone who can only save themselves? Are you exhausted from carrying someone else's responsibilities? Are you confusing enabling with love, rescue with support? Maybe you're the Gerry in this story, the family hero who's been picking up the pieces for so long that you've forgotten what your own life looks like, the person everyone calls when there's a crisis, the one who always has the answers, the one who's slowly disappearing under the weight of someone else's problems. Or maybe you're recognizing yourself as someone who's been relying on others to manage the consequences of your choices. Maybe you've been so used to being rescued that you don't know if you're capable of rescuing yourself. Here's what I want you to consider. What if the person you're trying to save actually needs you to step back? What if your willingness to always catch them is preventing them from learning to stand on their own? What if your love is accidentally becoming their prison? Sometimes love means holding someone accountable even when it breaks your heart to do it. Sometimes love means believing in someone's strength even when they don't believe it in themselves. Sometimes love means stepping back so someone can step up. Your greatest strengths often emerge from your deepest struggles, and sometimes the universe takes away our rescuers to help us discover we can actually save ourselves. What have you been rescuing someone from that they need to face themselves? What consequences have you been cushioning that might actually lead to growth? What enabling behavior have you mistaken for love? Maybe you're in that dark place right now, wondering if stepping back means you don't care enough. But here's what I want you to consider. What if your love doesn't have to be their lifeline? What if it could be their foundation for building their own strength instead? If Gerry's story moved you, I'd love to hear about a time when you had to choose between rescuing someone and letting them find their own strength. Or maybe you're still learning how to love someone without enabling them. Maybe you're the person who finally learned to save yourself when no one else would do it for you. Leave a comment below and share your story. Your turning point might help someone else find the courage to set healthy boundaries or discover their own power to heal. And if you're ready for another powerful transformation, check out our other videos. We drop a new one every week. Don't forget to like this video if Gerry's story resonated with you, and subscribe for more weekly stories where difficult love becomes real love, where boundaries become freedom, and where letting go becomes the greatest act of faith. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a turning point that could change everything. Remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is trust someone enough to let them save themselves. Your love doesn't have to be their crutch, it can be their foundation for finding their own strength. Sometimes losing our rescuer is exactly what we need to discover our own power to heal. I'll see you in the next video.